And you're live.
Hello, this is Candid Frank. Welcome to News Flash on the BarnBurner TV Network and Zingo TV Channel 250. Remember to download the BarnBurner and Zingo TV app available on Android and iOS. I hope we find you and yours healthy and safe now. Joining me, Aaron William Freeland. Good day, Aaron. How you doing today?
I'm very well, Frank. How are you?
All right, a cursory view of the news, something that we can debate. This is something I mentioned last time. We've done this, we did this for a while back in the day, a few years ago when we were less gray. Oh, okay, I was less gray. I don't want to throw you under the bus. My apologies. So let's start with the Canadian news. And I think that the big news is, I guess it would have to be, the big news would have to be that in Ontario, the cases have risen drastically, which might be a concern. I think we lost Aaron. So while
looking at the numbers that we hear, I think I saw 177 cases in Ontario. This sudden uptick actually clear, Frank. Still showing it is connected on my end here, so.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I was going to say, based on the uptick in cases that we saw in COVID-19, it looks like it coincides with the first weekend of really good weather we had, where all of a sudden everybody's like, the world is better, let's go outside. So we're dealing with that for a little while.
So that confirms the general concern across the world, North America in particular, because that's the news we get here in Canada. We get American news, we get Canadian news. So we get the North American flavor of what's going on with COVID. It has been discussed. It has been, in fact, offered that this business of going back out is going to create a spike, and not tomorrow. Unfortunately, with this illness, this virus, it takes, they say 2 weeks, and now they're even saying it could take up to 3 weeks for the effects of you getting it. The transmission is one thing, but when it manifests itself and when you get sick, could be as long as 3 weeks down the road. It used to be a week to 2 weeks, and now they've extended that. So what we're seeing is, in effect, what you're saying is the main concern, which is we feel confident now because the hospitals aren't clogged. We feel confident now that the cases start to drop, but the reason is we're not contacting each other. So now you're going to end up, what's going to happen is there's going to be a reaction to people going out, for example, like you said, good weather, they get together, go to the backyard and sit at a table and have a couple of pots together and socialize. It's so beautiful out. The women talk about the flowers. I don't want to sound like a sexist. And the men start talking about the sports that isn't happening. That's just generally speaking. I'm just to make the banter here. So what happens is, because of the proximity, it's not, everybody doesn't have the luxury of being 6 feet away and have 7, 8 people. That's quite the table to have that. So do you see that what concerns the doctors are having are beginning to play out? Is that what you're saying about this?
It does appear that, yes, they are correct. Everybody likes to play off doctors and pandemicists and medical profession in general as doomsayers. But the fact of the matter is, it's going to keep spiking. Until we get at least 10 days of no new cases, there is no reason for people to go outside. I say this as someone who's immunocompromised myself. I am self-isolating. I'm making sure that I wear a mask every time I go out because I'm at a greater risk of contracting this than most other people, to be honest. So it's frustrating. You know what I mean?
But Aaron, unfortunately, this virus and the process of protecting oneself is limited. You cannot protect yourself when you go out by wearing a mask. Really, honestly, it's the other person that should be wearing the mask if you're to be protected. That is the problem with with this business with the masks. The only other thing I could say is a mask so that you don't touch your mouth, and goggles so you don't touch your eyes. That is the limit of, I think, that those things do for you. When someone else doesn't have a mask and they are they are asymptomatic, right? They can be giving it to you and they don't even realize they're doing that. And you don't even realize it's happening. So that's why the masks have to be worn. Like sports, it's not, you got to play defense and offense. So you've got to protect yourself at the same time that you have to protect others at the same time. So yeah, I didn't realize you had immunity issues. I hope everything, I hope you're safe. It sounds like you're protecting yourself. I wanted to also, with Ontario being of a concern, at the same time, we have also gotten word. We won't talk about this too much, but it's important, I guess. Sports organizations are being told they've got permission to start thinking about coming back and doing stuff in Ontario. Will this, what we just talked about, put a damper on that very thought?
Probably not. I mean, the bottom line is they're looking at revenues here. And in order to make sure that they continue to be viable, they've got to do that sort of thing. I don't know if you saw the news earlier today, but James Wilder had some very strong opinions about the CFL asking for bailout money. So that's something else that we can look at. I know, Frank, you mentioned you were planning on bringing in a sports guy a little bit later. I don't know if you guys wanted to touch on James Wilder's comments concerning the CFL and their bailout funds, but that's something to definitely look at.
Give me a minute summary of Wilder's.
Basically, it boils down to, look, the owners are going to ask for the money. Odds are they're not going to include the players. They're going to say they are, but they won't and make fat stacks. That's basically what it boils down to. He's basically firing a warning shot across the bow of the owners saying, guys, don't forget about us. Because without us, you really don't have a product.
Absolutely. But this is just another debate, just like, bargaining, well, anyway, it's contract negotiation. It's the same thing. And of course, from the CFL's perspective, they're not going to tip their hand at this point.
No.
And I think the politicians were correct in pointing out, and I agree, in fact, that Randy Ambrosie didn't come as prepared as he should be. Because if he's going to ask for money, he first has to give the reason why he needs the money, lay it out, and then he has to tell them what he's going to do with the money. So that goes without saying. I mean, we live in Canada. It's not the United States. We don't have all this unlimited funds. We're very conservative when it comes to that kind of behavior. Not that we're conservative, but when it comes to that kind of behavior, when it comes to money, we're conservatives as conservative gets, I think. Even our Liberal Party, because of the 3-party system, 4-party system, all that kind of stuff. I don't want to get into the weeds. At the end of the day, when and if the government says we're thinking about giving you money, Randy Ambrosie has to come up with a checklist of where that money's going. We know that.
Yeah.
That goes without saying, right?
It's got to be accounted for. They're not just going to give him the money. He's got to show where it's going to go. There has to be some benefit, not only for the owners, but also for the players. It can't all just be going into the owners' pockets. That was Wilder's point, and the CERB and the programs that are being set up now are going to take that into account. Right.
But again, here's the problem. And this is where I step in. The federal government has a way of people getting their, and in fact, the federal government has, Trudeau has promised again, where he's going to help with people's wages, right? There's going to be the wage supplement, the wage help.
Yeah.
Canadian players, see, this is where I'm curious. Are Canadian athletes able to go into there? Are the CFL players, who, by the way, don't earn that much money, so it's not like Gretzky or sorry,
no.
It's not like Marner going and say, I'd like help, right? These athletes make $50,000 a year or whatever. I just think as far as the government is concerned, they're going to help people with wages if I can transition into regular folks. And of course, if you're a millionaire, right? And you're going to take, we saw this in the US, right? Where the big companies were getting, it was supposed to be small business assistance. Well, the small businesses that what were assisted were like chains of Starbucks and all them, and they were taking $6, $7, $8 million until they were embarrassed into giving that money back. Ultimately, it should be prorated. It's going to have to be prorated, obviously, and it's going to have to be there's going to have to be a ceiling as to who can expect to get money, because what's the help for, honestly? Is it not for rent, food, and all the necessities of life? If it is to buy another boat or to buy another cottage or to invest in whatever, I don't think that's where we should be today. How do you feel about feathering one's rich nest as opposed to feeding one's nest?
And this is the whole point behind the CERB. The Canadian bailout is more designed for that. It's up to $2,000 a month for people who need it for rent, for bills, for all that sort of stuff. It's not for feathering one's nest as it is. I know if sports teams are going to be applying for it, then we're looking at a situation here where they're looking to pay office overhead. In some cases, for example, let's say the National Lacrosse League, the Toronto Rock don't own the Scotiabank Arena. They pay rent there. So they have games left. They had games left in the season that technically hadn't been canceled yet because the season had been postponed. They finally announced that they were canceling it last week, but at the same time, they still have to pay for office space. They still have to pay for the rental of the Scotiabank Arena while they haven't canceled games yet. They still have to pay players, all that sort of thing. So once everything shifts into canceled, then there is all of a sudden everybody wants to get paid, right? If you've got 6 games left in the season and your contract is, say, $30,000, you're still going to want to get paid out for the remainder of that particular season, which puts an immediate cash crunch on companies like that. Teams like MLSC, who own all the stadiums where their teams play, like BMO Field, the Coca-Cola Coliseum, the Scotiabank Arena, they're in a slightly better situation because at least they have merchandise sales to help prop them up, and everybody buys Leafs and Raptors stuff. Let's be honest, even when they're not playing. It's the smaller market teams and it's the smaller market and more niche, quote unquote, sports that are going to end up suffering the most in all of this. So, like small businesses, a lot of these organizations have under 250 people that they employ. The Canadian government is more looking towards, I think, supporting them than supporting the major corporations.
Right. So but also, I thought you were saying that, but I'll try and expand on what I think I heard. And here's what I'm going to say. We when we talk about sports, the first thing we think about are the owners and the players. They're the major eaters of the income of a sports franchise. What I concern myself with, and I'm just wondering, if one is to assume that the ticket taker at BMO, right? The ticket taker,
they don't get paid.
You go to the federal government and say, look, I lost my job, can I get paid? Right? If they earn enough money, you have to earn X amount of money so that you can collect. They can be helped. And the league and the team, the organization, the league, whatever, they don't have to worry about that cost. So that's what I think, in my opinion, that's what Ambrosie and other leagues are going to have problems with. You can't have double dipping. They can't claim money for employees that they're not paying and then take the money and not pay them. Because first people that they should be taking care of, in my opinion, is they should be taking care of the ticket takers. They should be taking care of the team staff, the therapists, all these other people that, are I think even the government would agree, right?
Most definitely.
Right? Those are employees. Those are people who live from day to day. They're not people who get a signing bonus for $5 million and so I think we agree on that. Too bad we agree on it that we can't argue about that. But that's what has to happen with Ambrosie and all the other sports franchises and anybody who wants to make money on this. The lesson in the U.S. was learned that, when they give money to big companies, they end up doing what's called buybacks. So what they do is they make the stock even better but they're not actually supporting the organization itself. They're just supporting some people who are making a profit.
And that's what people forget, though. Everybody's like, oh, the stock market is great. The economy is fantastic. The stock market is not the economy. It's a part of it, but it's not the economy. Just because the stock market is over 21,000 or whatever the Dow Jones is at, does not necessarily mean that life is better for people in the trenches. And it is the beer vendors, and it is the concession sellers, and it is the ticket takers, and it is the ushers that are all majorly affected by this. Most of the major sports teams did come up with a bridge program for their people to apply for EI and eventually get it, but
again, it's just a marginal amount of money. It's not enough.
It's liquidity issues, and everybody's going to have them, and it's really frustrating.
Let me try and make a parallel here. It's like saying players, owners, and beer sellers they all get paid. They don't all get paid.
No.
There's a whole different level of getting paid when you're a player. There's a whole different level of getting paid when you're an owner, and there's a whole level different when you're just selling beer. So, and it's those people, it's the people who work from day to day, and that people have tried elevating it to small business, which is respectable too. That's fair, because if the true small business, we're talking about workers, now small business, the true small business people are people who actually work 70, 80 hours a week, who invested probably more money than they can afford. They probably even took a loan out so they could buy the pizza. Like, when you walk into a pizza, they're not all corporate stores. Some of those stores are actually owned by people who pay a franchise fee, and many of them, maybe some, have money and they can afford to buy a franchise, but buying that franchise doesn't give you 100% return at the end of a year. There's actually work involved. You actually have to do something to earn that money. And what you're doing when you do something like that is you're betting on yourself. You're saying, I can make this work. And those are the people that I consider small business. Franchise, just because it has a recognizable name on the front, doesn't necessarily mean that that's a big company. It can be a franchise, much like the local Five and Dime, right? The local variety store, right? Maybe, just maybe, they might have money enough to own it. Maybe they didn't have to borrow the money, but the return on something like that is a living wage. It's a good living wage. To me, small business operators are the new middle class, because the middle class doesn't exist as we once knew it. Now the middle class are people who invest okay, who work with finance and understand it a little bit, where they can afford things that other people who are living from day to day can't. It all comes down to the middle class has always been hardworking. The middle class has always been about saving, and the middle class has recently become investing. Back in the day when my father was considered middle class and my mother were both working, at that time that was the luxury, two people working. It was not about getting rich. It was about securing your old age, your senior life. Pay off the house, maybe live off what's in the house, or have some kind of nest egg, so when you retire, you can be taken care of. That used to be what the middle class looked like. It doesn't look like that right now, Aaron, and those are the people that are getting hurt the most by this COVID virus.
I can't say I disagree with you on that one, Frank. You're spot on with that analysis. It is the way it works. I mean, there's a local business around the corner from me that I patronize a lot, mainly because it's a small family-run business. I think they have 6 or 8 employees, but I always see the owners in there, and it's because that is their job, that is their life. They can barely afford the rent in the mall that they're currently in, because everybody's not going out as frequently anymore. They're not getting as many orders. They're barely scraping by, and it's the hardest thing in the world for me to see, which is why I try to make a point to go by 3 or 4 times a week, because, support your local businesses, right? I'm one of those individuals that's lucky enough to have a job where I can work from home and I can have a steady paycheck, and I have a little bit of security when it comes to making sure that I've got a paycheck coming in every 2 weeks. The people at my local mall that run a small business there, they need the help. So, I'm more than happy to throw whatever cash I can their way whenever I can. If it means I put on a few pounds, it means I put on a few pounds. It's not the end of the world. I can run that off. So
I think I just noticed that. I noticed that for a while there, it sounded like you were being nice, but now it seems like you're trying to blame them for your problem with extra weight.
oh, hell no. The food they serve is fantastic. The fact that I'm sitting on my ass is entirely my fault.
It was going so well there, Mr. Nice Guy.
I know. I was so close.
Hurt yourself, patting yourself up. Creepers. No, it's true though. Your feelings are, what I have found in my biggest experience and from what I've garnered from what's going on is actually we've seen a pretty good side of humanity. I wouldn't have guaranteed that the behavior, the level of generosity, kindness, decency, and cooperation, I would never have thought it would have been to this degree. That makes me sound pretty negative. I apologize, but we've seen so much evidence that the opposite is true. That we've seen if red flags are red flags, the way we behave sometimes in humanity, we're very selfish and self-centered. It seemed. Do you think we're going to be able to hang on to this attitude? Because it is an attitude that I find very, very nice, and I really welcome it. I'm just not sure about what happens once things get back to normal. I mean, does the rat race pick up where it left off?
It's an attitude that people are fun. They're having a lot of trust. Not necessarily here, but there's one example of the nasty side coming out. But I think people all have to realize that there's a cycle of grief that we're currently going through here because of the death of our old normal, right? Where there's anger, depression, acceptance. We're going through those stages step by step. Right now, you're seeing a lot of anger out of the States, but and because everybody's realizing you can't just walk over to your local McDonald's anymore. You can't just go to the pub for a pint. You actually have to stay at home with the kids. And God forbid you actually have to talk with the person on the other side of the couch there when, people are realizing life isn't as easy as they thought it was, and it's different now. And animals in general don't like different. Humans in particular don't like different. The more things stay the same, the more we like it.
The law has ground to a halt here in Canada, it seems, the legal system. And in the U.S., it's sort of ground to a halt. But one of the things that has come up in the legal system in the United States is divorce by video. It's one of the first things that they did, court by TV, by this kind of court going on was for divorces. Well, I mean, if you were in a real good place with your mate before this happened, can you imagine being stuck you don't live in a mansion. You don't mind me saying that, right?
No,
but
it's definitely not a mansion.
The kind of house that you live in, or the kind of house I used to live in, and you're going through a tough time with your mate, or even your children, or even whatever, your in-laws or whatever. This is one of the things that this is one of the things that one of the worst social emotional things that this thing has done. It's put people together who don't want to be together, and I hope when this is all over, we don't find out there's a lot of missing people everywhere because it concerns me that I know it sounds crazy, but that's one of the concerns I have, because they have talked about abuse, domestic abuse is rising. I talked about all the good things. Now let's go to a bit of the bad, and people are trapped in their home, whether they're trapped under abuse or whether it's even I've seen men who are abused. Passive aggressive abuse is a thing. It's just not something that, you hang your hat on because, it isn't as dominant. It doesn't offer the same kind of picture that, physical abuse has. Totally understandable, but it exists. And so we have that issue. That's one of the, sidebars of this whole COVID thing is the emotional state of people because of being stuck where they are. And some people are plain old claustrophobic, you know, so this can't be very helpful for them.
Now, speaking of mental health, this is actually Mental Health Week here in Canada as well, so that leads into that very nicely. I think now more than ever, it's important for us to sit back and take stock of where we are emotionally, where we are mentally, and see if there's something we can do to improve that. Reach out to somebody. Like now, more than ever, it's important to make sure that you get in contact with other people. You know, call your brother, call your uncle, call your sister. Just reach out. How you doing? You know, exactly.
You could just pick up the phone.
Use it for something else other than Facebook.
Well, it's so smart. It's even it's dumb as a telephone. You know,
there you go.
Dumb it down. You can dumb it down. Yeah. So that's the thing that we need to do, and that is to respect the situation, understand it better. You know, the simple things like washing your hands, you know, wearing a mask. People like you who are immune, who have immunity concerns. We have to do it for you. I have to do it for you. We have to do that for each other. We really have done a good job. Humanity has been pretty good. You know, I mean, we do have, you know, the politics of humanity can't be deadened as easily as the neighbor relationship. You know, the one-on-one, the small group with the small group. You know, we've watched as people have been very kind. We've watched as people who have helped to support each other on balconies, you know, in BC and Italy and all across the world, people making noise at a certain time of the day just to say thank you to our frontline folks that take care of us and are there for us. And we've even learned to add, as I've said a couple of shows previously before you were around, even the people who serve our groceries, we're beginning to give them almost the same kind of credit. And they deserve it at this time, especially like our first responders. You know, I call them our last responders because they're the people of the last resort. You know, you got to go. Yeah. They're the people of the last resort. There's nowhere else. If they're not there, we're not getting their food.
I'd like to leave you with a final thought, if I could. There was a relatively famous mayor who said this, and I think this applies now more than any other time. Be good to yourselves and each other.
Yeah, and the city that we live in, well, you're in Mississauga now, but the big city closest to us used to be known as Toronto the Good. When was the last time you heard that?
Far too long.
Isn't it? And
I've heard the big smoke far too often in the center of the universe, along with other derogatory terms.
Well, on a very quick note, I'm disappointed, and for the friends that I have, we had an incident that happened in the U.S. where a black jogger was killed, and it wasn't until a video was posted that you know, finally charges were brought against people. That's still going on, and that's one of the things that concerns me are the police, how well they can cooperate in this. Next week, if God willing, you're willing to come back, we can continue on that, how tough the police work is next time we're on the program. He's Aaron William of Freeland. I'm Candid Frank, and you're watching Newsflash on the BarnBurner TV Network and on Zingo TV channel 250. Remember to download the BarnBurner and Zingo TV app, available on Android and iOS devices. Don't forget about the BarnBurner Radio Network. This is on the BarnBurner Radio Network later, which is available on 122 platforms. Watch us, hear us, read us, and download. Have a great day, everyone.